Hi Hannah, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you very much for joining me today. I'm so excited for a conversation.
Me
I
too.
know we have a lot of interesting things to talk about.
You
So
do.
I would love to jump right in. And if you can introduce yourself, provide a brief, overview of your background as well as your expertise with the topic of collaborative intelligence, for everyone to get to know you a little better. I think that would be great.
Good. Well, gosh, where do you start, right? But if we start with how I got into collaborative intelligence in this space, I'll tell you that most of my career, not all of it, but most of my career has been in management consulting, which is all about collaborating with clients, all about working through difficult challenges. And I'll tell you, it's not an easy profession. There's a lot of difficult things to work through. And I honestly felt like, even though I was progressing and doing very well in my career, I felt like I needed something more in order to be as effective as I would like to be. And through circumstance, I was introduced to the world of human-centered design or design thinking, depending on the label you prefer, because one of my clients needed to be more innovative. And that was not a body of knowledge that I had acquired in my career. And once I was exposed to that way of working, which is essentially three things. It is a process that makes a lot of sense, unlike other processes where it's important to really understand the challenge and the people who are suffering from it or working through it, being creative, and then working through how to implement those outcomes, learning how to do that, learning about new mindsets, which is where it starts to cross into the soft skill world of being curious, being open-minded. I was never taught to be that in my earlier career. And finally, and almost most importantly for me, what I learned in that experience was some incredibly powerful methods for helping teams collaborate and come up with better outcomes. And once I learned that way of working, literally the next day, I took some of the methods I'd learned to my client situations, and I started to do all of my work in this way with some pretty large clients like Starbucks and others in the Seattle area. And I became convinced that this is the way to work. And in the company that I was working in, they were interested in doing this, but not quite as much as I was. And that was when I decided to spin off and start my own company, SALT Collaboratory. And in my company, we focus on exactly collaborative intelligence skills, either through training and educating, if that's what our clients need, or through helping them work through their challenges using these particular methods.
I love it. I love the fact that every time you learn something new, it kind of opens up a whole new world. Like what you just said, it's amazing. Like that's why you can never stop learning. It's like limiting the world in your eyes.
Right.
So
And I think when you stumble upon something that your experience tells you you were missing, often when I'm working with clients or other collaborators, some people enjoy the experience and move on, and others have that eye-opening moment where they say to me, this is what I've been missing. How do I bring this into my world as well?
wow. Yeah, that must feel good when you get this moment.
Well, I think that's whenever we're working with people also in the soft skills place, you connect with certain people, and some people are open to learning and others aren't as much. But what I think is really interesting about this particular skill set is that those of us who've been working for a while, so, a few decades, probably missed this body of knowledge earlier in their careers. It is now, but it wasn't taught at MBA schools. It wasn't included in consulting onboarding programs. Excuse me. So many of the people who are running companies right now actually don't know this. It's a foreign body of knowledge. It's what the designers do or something.
Mm.
And some of those folks who see this have that eye-opening moment and want to bring it in. Others are less open. But I do think it's interesting that the seniors in our business environment actually don't know how to do this for the most part. And the newer people coming through do, but because their leaders don't know to ask for it or expect the younger people to follow the way they do their work, it sort of dies. And so I'm on a mission, really. I love teaching, early career people. And I have two people who work with me who left their traditional careers and went back to graduate school to study it further. But I really personally am on a mission to help my peers who are senior in their fields understand that it's not too late and that this is something they should acquire so that they can lead their younger friends through their careers in a more effective way.
Amazing. And I've never asked you, what does the name of your company mean? Does it stand for anything?
It does. Well, we're two ladies with accents, immigrants to the United States. And and I'll say naming a company is hard, as I know you probably know naming your own. And my daughter, who can actually get her Girl Scout badge in design thinking because the kids are doing it now, she was with some friends and they were playing a restaurant game when she was younger. And she told me the name of the restaurant is Best Restaurant. And I said, oh, it's a good name for a restaurant. Where did it come from? And she said, it stands for Bella, Emmanuel, Soleil, and Tessa, the 4 kids who were playing together.
Oh my God.
When I started playing with mine, I thought, well, let me write down, I don't know, start with places that I've lived and see if a word comes out. And it stands for South Africa, Seattle. There's Amsterdam in there too, because I lived in Amsterdam, London, Toronto, and Tel Aviv. These are all the places in the world that I've lived.
Wow.
And I think the other thing that worked well for me is that, sort of like I've explained up until now, I feel like design thinking and collaborative intelligence is the missing ingredient. And just like when you're cooking and you're like, it doesn't taste right, let me add some salt and the dish pops.
Oh, that's so smart. Yeah, I'm so glad I asked you that because I was always wondering, but yeah, it didn't come up.
And I will tell you the collaboratory part of it, when I was researching the space and proposing to my company that we have a center of excellence for this way of working, this article that I read said, don't call it a center of excellence, because then the people who are not in it don't feel excellent. Call it something else, like a collaboratory. So I didn't make up that word, but I really liked this notion of, people working together within the name rather than you're on the outside or the inside.
Yeah, that definitely resonates. I remember in the early days of Dextego too, I went around and asked a ton of people, interviewed them, what they think about the idea. And initially it was mostly focused on leadership. So similarly to what you just said, I was asking them, would you download an app that would help you boost your leadership skills? And a lot of people said that they didn't see themselves as leaders. So they wouldn't feel like this app is for them. But when you do it more general about soft skills, everyone understands that it can apply to them because we can all boost our soft skills, whether this is communication, leadership, collaboration, whatever skill you're looking to develop, it can apply to a much broader population. So that's very interesting. Yeah, I hear you. So tell us a little bit about the connection of the soft skills that you see come up a lot in collaborative intelligence workshops that you do, your work with clients. Can you give a couple of examples of soft skills that come up?
I'd be happy to. So, just for people who are listening, and honestly, I had to do this myself, because when you say to somebody, what do you mean by soft skills? I'm thinking, oh, well, it's all that stuff that makes you effective. But if you break it down, when I think about it, it is just like you said, it's communication, it's collaboration, it's negotiation, problem solving, leadership, all the things that we do in our day-to-day work and honestly struggle with, right? Unless we were, touched by something to be naturally good at it. And what I appreciate for myself and what I think is true for others is, I was a principal in a management consulting company. I'd been principal, early in my career as well. I had done well, and people would tell me, or my clients would tell me, that I was effective and they enjoyed working with me and all those good things. But I always felt like I was missing the hard skills to make my soft skills even more effective. And when I discovered this body of knowledge, that was when it clicked for me that this was the missing piece. And all of the other good stuff that I'd cultivated, I'm a relatively good communicator, I'm a relatively good leader. I mean, relatively speaking, I should be it after all these decades, but acquiring this knowledge was, supercharged everything, because the way that design thinking and collaborate, I'm going to use them interchangeably because I think a lot of things are labels, and essentially what we're talking about is ways of working to achieve an outcome. And when I think about how this way of thinking helps me and my clients, the first thing we do is we understand where we are in the story. Are we trying to understand what's going on? Are we still learning about the problem and defining it? Are we trying to come up with ways to solve it? Or are we trying to get something done and either in the market or implement it? And what I find with a lot of traditional leaders is, because of their old school way of thinking, they immediately think they need to have the solution and start implementing. That's where they start. If there's a problem, they call a meeting and they tell everybody, this is what I've decided we're doing because I am the leader. Sometimes that's appropriate. Sometimes I help them by saying, do you really need to know the answer right now? And do you really understand the problem well enough? And have you really engaged the right people to make sure that you haven't misunderstood the problem? So sometimes I can sort of move them back in time and get them to work through the challenge in a more structured manner. And that's already a big shift for them. And I think it the pressure off. I think when you're stressed, you can just be mean much more easily.
So
but,
true.
If you're starting to get into this mindset of, if I just solve every problem that comes into my office and I run to the solution, I'm probably going to mess up. And if we teach people and we show people that actually going back to the beginning doesn't take longer. It actually, if you know how to do it well, it can get you to a much better solution much faster. And so there's a shift in mindset there, first of all. And then depending on the challenge, and we can get into more of this, and you can see I'm surrounded by all my methods. Depending on the challenge, the way that it typically works is somebody has to lead the charge, right? So either somebody from the client, or if I'm helping out, I'll lead the charge. And we structure collaborative sessions with the people who have the right intelligence for the problem. So when you're working through challenges, you want to be very mindful about who is in the room with you, who you might need to interview or learn from outside. But this is a team sport, because in the name, it's about collaborating, and it's about really being intentional about pulling together the intelligence of the participants. So once you've decided who's going to be there, and you're going to be better off if your participants are diverse in their opinions, in their experience, in their roles, in their levels. This is a way of working that checks the diversity box very quickly. So you've got a diverse team. You've got somebody who's minding the store. You can rotate it, but you need somebody who knows what the beginning, middle, and end looks like. It is a process after all. And once that's set up, then we start by looking at the unique challenge in front of us and deciding what we need to do from a method perspective and from a construct perspective to work through these phases of understand, create, and deliver. So that's kind of the macro story. If anybody says, well, what's going on here? I would say, well, we're working through a challenge. We know where we are in it. We have a really strong, diverse team, and we have somebody who knows something about this way of working. Because it is, it's what I've found in my own experience and in my clients' experience is that it is a deep skill. Design thinking and collaborative intelligence are not difficult to understand from a concept perspective, but they do take practice to execute well. And so folks who want to go into this space probably need to be, quite committed to learning how to do this, to practicing, to making mistakes, to getting better, to becoming.
But do you think everyone can learn this skill with practice?
I think that everyone can learn some basic, killer methods to propel them forward in their soft skill development. So if you say to me, I've got somebody who's interested in this, who works in a team, who's not really looking to lead it necessarily, but is, deals with challenges like how do you get good feedback from your team? They're a team leader. Deals with challenges like prioritization, deals with challenges like ideation. They don't need to become experts, but if they deal with these types of challenges, what would you tell me? And I would say, oh, well, for example, if they want to get the opinions of their team on a particular challenge, and they don't want to run a traditional meeting where only one person talks at a time and somebody can take the talking stick for way too long, and there really isn't enough time to think, I would say to them, let me show you a method that could be helpful. For example, this one over here behind me on the wall, this is a method called round robin. And in round robin, a question is posed at the top, something like, how might we, whatever it is that we're trying to solve for. And then each member of the team gets a color. And the first thing they're asked to do is to provide an answer, give an idea for how they would address that challenge. So quietly, they sit and they think and they write down their idea on their sticky note. And this notion, and this is very common in this way of working, this notion of giving people time to have a sticky note and have a Sharpie and have no noise. When you write something down, you have to think about it. You can't just spout, right? So there's a lot of balance between, now I'd like you to write something about whatever it is, and then as your leader, I'm going to put it together in various tools. So this is a tool, for example, where, just to go back to this, each person has written their answer, what they would do about that challenge. And then they move one spot to the right. And they look at the challenge above them and they critique it. So everybody gets to be a critic. And they say, oh, well, you said this is why it won't work. We're asking them to find a flaw. And we do this because in this way of working, it's very important not to fall in love with your idea too soon. Definitely want input and feedback, because if you've been working on something for 15 minutes on a napkin and you show it to a friend and they say it's rubbish, you'll blow your nose with a napkin, you're fine. But if you've been working on it for 6 months in your basement and then you show it to a friend and they say it's rubbish, you can't hear it. So we talk about this notion of critique because it's so helpful. And then we say, well, good. Now let's have you move one more spot to the right. Start at the beginning of the story, read somebody's idea, read the other person's critique, doesn't really matter who it is, and fix it. Come up with a solution for the critique. And so, this exercise can be done in 15 minutes, 20 minutes in a meeting. Nobody's talking while they're working, but when you're done, everybody goes back to where if you finished here, you go back to where you started. And it's really interesting to see what somebody did to your idea. You didn't think of that. So this teaches people the value of creating space to get that collaborative intelligence going. It's incredibly valuable. And you come out of it with some really interesting starters of ideas that you develop further with other methods so that you can pull together that input and actually put it into your solution rather than having just one person dominate or.
Yeah, this is super powerful. I can see it being used really by any company and any problem that they face. So what would you say is the number one challenge that you face where teams are like resistant to completing this, and how you overcome the challenge?
Well, the first thing, before we go into that, I just want to pick up on your topic of any team should be able to use this. Mm-hmm. And so when I was learning this, somebody said to me, you need reading, writing, arithmetic, and these methods if you want to be successful. These are so fundamental to our ability to be successful when we're working together, when we're collaborating. And I really believe that. And I see it because my clients are all over the place. I've done work for Winnebago, which is the RV company, and Santander in Argentina, which is a huge bank, and Blue Pearl, which is a vet hospital chain, and Delta Dental, which is oral health, and consulting companies. And people say to me, what industry do you focus on? Like the industry of working together. That's what I do. Because it really is a fundamental skill. And in terms of resistance, I think my husband was asking me this question yesterday, but I think the resistance, if I encounter it, is usually at the leadership level in terms of, do we really need this? We've been managing so well up until now. Do we really need this? And in situations like that, sometimes, depending on the person, it's helpful to tell them statistics like from a Doodle study, $541 billion are wasted in bad meetings every year, and 24 billion hours are going to be wasted next year. And so this is and nobody says, no, that can't be true, right? I mean, it's a huge problem, these ineffective meetings. I can tell them that companies like IBM, who went all in on design thinking and working like this, again, interchangeable language, they train 90,000 people. They're the biggest design company in the world. They've seen that their teams work 2 times faster, that their design time is reduced by 75%, that the development time is reduced by 33%. The McKinsey does studies that shows that working this way doubles shareholder value and revenue. So it's real. It takes commitment. It takes investment for sure, because it looks easier than it is. But the resistance is usually at that level. I have almost never encountered a resistance to doing the work once we're in the session.
Yeah.
Because it's interesting, people are seeing.
You get engaged.
Right,
Yeah.
they're seeing things they've never seen before. Somebody said, if you see and do new things, you feel like you're living longer, right? If you go on vacation for a weekend, it feels like 5 days. If you stay in your apartment, it feels like 5 minutes. So we need new experiences. They wake us up. And it's not just that they're fun and interesting, they really learn what their colleagues think. They really see their colleagues in a new light. And, before the pandemic, when everything was really in person and sticky notes, and a lot of the work that we did involved visual representation of ideas. So people were drawing. And in every session I would lead, there would be one or two people who had incredible skills. They were artists and nobody knew. Their colleagues didn't know. And so on the soft skill side, what I've seen happen is just a much richer appreciation for what colleagues bring to the table, whether it's, the idea that they wrote down or what they drew. All of a sudden, people look around them and think, oh, you're not a bunch of idiots, They should appreciate what you're bringing to the table a little bit more.
I can see the benefit being much more like long lasting, even after, let's say, a 3-month session of design thinking workshops. This bonding can translate to so much more after that. Like people will be more open, they would probably spend more time outside work or during lunch, and that can really have a long lasting impact.
Yeah,
so for sure, the ROI, is huge.
It definitely is. I've had the types of work that I've done since I started the company have been quite varied. So one of my clients is a consulting company, and they initially wanted to hire me when I was leaving my other company. And I said, I'm already a principal in a consulting company. I don't want to just switch like for like. I think consulting is stale. I think that we're not doing anything interesting anymore. And I want to bring these types of skills to consulting companies. And that resonated with them, and they brought me in. And, a few years later, we've trained 250 of their team members and have run, training and coaching programs to the point where it's a major part of their business now. They all, not a lot of them, work this way, think this way, take it to their clients. So it sort of perpetuates that good behavior of my meeting is structured, come on in, I do want to hear from you genuinely, and I'm going to create the space because I don't have to know the answer. And that's the big shift in terms of pressure. I think I need to be very skilled, but I don't need to be skilled in exactly your business to tell you what to do. I'd rather work with you and show you a way to find your own way out of it and add in expertise when I need it. Another client started out as a consulting client, not a training client. And we worked together for 2 years, doing different methods and, different challenges, big challenges. And towards the end, they said, okay, we're convinced that this is important. We want to get certified. I'm trained by an organization called the Luma Institute. It's owned by Mural, and I'm an affiliate partner, so I can Luma certify my clients. So I worked with them to design a training that meets Luma standards and was able to certify them, and they are off to the races. And the work that they've done changed the way they collaborate as a team and changed the way they're positioned in the eyes of their very skeptical ex-Amazon CEO. They're viewed as a team with very rich skills in the innovation space.
That's just so inspiring. That's change management, honestly.
Yeah.
Wow. So I'm curious if you have any clear distinctions between how different genders approach this, if something has been very noticeable through your sessions, and in particular, how they accept or perceive the feedback that you give. Because talking about change management, change is always difficult and it doesn't come easy to anyone. But
I will say that I'm not an expert in this, of course. I will say that this way of working, is the great equalizer. And the skill set is such that it's sort of in the middle. So if we stereotype, male or male-oriented people and say they like engineering and they like math, and if we stereotype women or women who identify as women or people who identify as women, then, we would say, well, they like change management. It's not, first of all, it's not true, but if there was any sort of stereotyping, maybe it would look something like that. And I think these skills live in the middle. They are technical to some extent. They are hard skills. There is, a manual that we have, so let's copy on it, but, there are methods that we study and we learn. We learn how to do round robin. I'm going to swing my camera a little bit. We learn how to do what's on your radar. We learn how to do bullseye diet. You have to learn. They're technical with this very, very small team. So there's structure to them. And at the same time, if you're more of a soft skill person, there's sort of embedded genius in them as well. And you can understand that at a deeper level, that when you bring, because you see it, when you bring these tools to your team, things that were very difficult for you to do become less difficult. So for example, if you think about having a conversation about something that didn't go well, or a project experience that was difficult, and you have to come together as a team and you have to talk about it. And nobody wants to come to that meeting, right? But if you say to people, we worked together for 6 months on this project, some things went well, some things didn't, we're going to debrief on that. And rather than asking everybody what they thought or asking people to shout things out, I don't know if you've ever been in these project retrospective meetings, which are painful. What you could say to them is, we're going to do a method called Rose, Thorn, Bud. And as the facilitator, I'm going to give each of you 3 pink sticky notes, 3 blue sticky notes, and 3 green sticky notes. And we stick them on a piece of paper so that they don't get all confused. So everybody comes in with that piece of paper with 3 of each. And we say to people, I'm going to give you 5-10 minutes, as much as you need, to reflect on our experience that we had together, 6 months, and think about 3 things that worked well. Because something must have been, the team dinner that we had, the first release of whatever, something went well. It wasn't all terrible. Connections. Now, those are the roses. Those are pink. Now we're going to ask you to reflect on things that didn't go well. They're thorns. And, sometimes people get confused with the colors. They're like, it made you feel blue. Okay. What made you feel blue? What made you miserable? Write those down. And so they'll do that. And then finally, you'll say, there were probably some things that you saw as areas of potential, where if we'd only had that type of meeting more often, or if we'd only, done that one codification a little bit more. And those are buds like spring, and they're green. So imagine you have a room of 12 people, nobody's saying anything. They're just working quietly, writing things down, and they don't resist. I've apart from one person who I'm never got along with anyway, but people don't resist doing this work. They do it genuinely, and they do it with depth and insight. And then as the facilitator of the meeting, my old way of working with positives and negatives, I'd say, bring me all the positives and let's organize them. And then bring me all the negatives. We don't do that here. Here we say, let's look for some themes, and we're interested in whether there's positive, negative, or with potential around a theme. So I say to you, give me let's start with one of your blues. Let's just get into it. What were you unhappy about in this project? And you say, I think the communication between team members was shocking. Okay. And then I would say, does anybody else have anything about communication and how we communicated as a team? And 2 other people will say, yep, it was a blue for me. And one other outlier would say, actually, I really thought compared to other teams I've been on, it was pretty good. And somebody else would say, I thought we could have had more of these team meetings. And there will be a cluster of sticky notes. And if you look at that communication one, they're going to be, for example, mostly blue. So that tells us that communication wasn't our strong point. And you can imagine all the notes get put up, all the clusters get built. Some of them are mostly pink, some of them are mostly blue, some of them are really mixed. And what you're doing there is you're not solving anything. You're just surfacing what was going on. You can even take that cluster and say, if this cluster could talk, what would it say? What is this cluster trying to tell us? And let's say you come out of this with 12 clusters. You can't possibly work on all of them, right? There's too much. So that's when you would just seamlessly introduce towards the end of the meeting, okay, this was really helpful. Thanks for helping us surface. Give me a quick sort of litmus test of which ones are most important to you. I'm going to give you, I'll give you the 4 dots to dot vote, for example, just to close out that meeting. So you haven't solved anything, but you've given the team time to go through that experience again, to hear from other people, to see that they weren't the only ones who thought communication was really difficult. And so when you have and that's an hour meeting, that's it. You get all of that output in an hour. And of course, you can do it in person, and you can do it just as well, or sometimes even easier, in these remote collaboration tools like Mural. So very easy to get it done. But that's sort of, if you think about collaborative intelligence and soft skills coming together, you as the leader are only taking an hour out of people's time. You're creating the space to hear from everybody. You're helping them see that they're not alone. You're helping them learn from other people, and you're giving them some sense of direction for what the next step in the work is. And it was an hour. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Right?
This is a game changer. I think it brought me back to a workshop I had done with chief of staffs, and everyone was saying how there's never enough communication in their companies. Like, employees always feel like there could be more communication happening from the top. And that exercise, what you just explained, allows so much transparency to come out, and everyone just has to be on the same page in terms of prioritization of issues, and then you hold leadership accountable to fixing it, because now everyone knows about it and we actually spoke about it. Whereas if you just ask in the meeting, no one would really want to share. They would feel
people don't want to talk, right?
Right. So yeah, it's super powerful. It's amazing, and everyone should be doing it. I mean,
exactly.
there's no
That
reason
goes
why
back
you
to
wouldn't.
reading, writing, and this is why people like me, I'm not the only one, and others, if we get into this deeply enough, we see that you can't help but pivot to work this way. So the folks who've worked for me, my own experience, others are just, and depending on your constitution, like, I actually feel I love doing it and it's fun and all that, but I really want to pass it on. I really want other people to learn this. There's enough space for all of us to be experts. There's no need to hang on to it, right? The more I can share, the better.
Yes, and earlier you said you were looking for technical skills to amplify your soft skills, but I feel like after what you said, it's bi-directional, like it goes both ways. You need enough soft skills to learn these technical skills and vice versa. And I think we need both combined to be able to solve any of these issues that we face in our work, and even even personal life, when you try to decide what issue to prioritize. Maybe you have that talk with your family.
These are all for working with the family, Bethel.
Oh, wow.
That's
nice.
Here's Emmanuel's handwriting. So you can see this.
And it's about what food you guys are gonna eat.
No, this was actually, we were planning a move to Vancouver that ended up being too complicated, but we were trying to get everybody on the same page. It's a really hard thing for a family to decide, and the kids have opinions. Yeah.
And that empowers kids too. They become in your eyes, some very key stakeholders, and that for them gives them a boost of confidence, so they can go and then be able to have the discussion in the workplace when they get to land like the first job. I think this is super important for families as well. Yeah, I totally agree. Awesome. So I got a last question for you. I was wondering, how can fostering a growth mindset contribute to the ongoing development of collaborative intelligence, whether it's at workplace or at home? And how can one foster that growth mindset, in your opinion?
Oh, I love that one. Well, I'll tell you, let me go from personal experience and then.
Sure.
So I believe that going on this path and developing the skill set has opened up my professional world in ways that wouldn't have happened before. And so we're talking about growth and moving into new ways of working and taking bigger chances, accepting bigger challenges. I almost see this as, if you're the type of person who wants to grow your mindset and climb the next mountain, whatever that means, whether it's personal skills or your work challenges, it would be a good idea to put these in your backpack as you set out on the journey, because it'll make it easier for you. And so, I see this as a strong amplifier for anybody who wants to keep going and keep learning. Because when you're in a situation where, a lot of our work comes down to, understanding what people need and want, or prioritizing, disparate things that we've learned, or being very, very creative in how we need to solve something, or getting organized, right? To make a presentation of an idea and to actually implement it. So it doesn't matter what we're doing elements of that all the time. And I'm not saying this is the only skill set. There's lots of other good skill sets, but I found that having these at my disposal meant that, I did a project during the pandemic. So I was just on my own in the company in those days. And the challenge, it was a multi-billion-dollar company, Heinz, which do real estate development and management. And the chief HR officer somehow found me as a design thinking person and said, I have to think about return to work. This is before Delta. Return to work. I've got people all around the world. I don't want to dictate. I've seen other people do design thinking. I need input from 120 people around the company. And I've broken them into 6 groups, and you get 4 hours with each group. And you need to tell me what they care about and what their ideas are for what they think return to work should look like. That was the challenge. And I can't imagine saying yes to something like that without this body of knowledge. She said, this is what I want. And I drew out some things. I said, great, let's do it. And we did it. And it was a, very successful project. But I think it helps put you in new situations, which is really how you grow. And I think it strengthens a lot of the soft skills like communication, collaboration, all of those things that you need to be successful. And it opens new worlds. It has for me.
Wow. And what happened? What was the outcome? Did they go back to work?
No, because after that came Delta, and after that came Omicron. Probably back now. And I think they really, we came out of this session with 24 concepts that had been prioritized but to look at. And, ideas like people who lived in suburbs outside of Houston where they're headquartered were saying, why don't you get us a common workspace in the suburb so that we can still come together as a team, those of us who are living further out, We don't want to work from home, come together as a team, but not do the hour and a half commute into Houston every day. So it was sort of ideas like that that I think resonated with them. It's been several years. I'm not sure exactly what they ended up doing, but I know they used the output.
Amazing. Well, Hannah, I've learned so much in just a certain amount of time. So I can't imagine how much you teach people you work with. And I want to thank you really from the bottom of my heart for taking the time. You're such a fierce, woman. You've done so much, and it's really awesome to see.
Well, thank you. Back at you. I want to do the flip and interview you about your fabulous company and all the things that you're doing.
We'll do that. We'll do that. Awesome. Thank you, and take care.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.
Awesome. Great. It went very good. You are so knowledgeable. I love it.
Thank you for saying that.